Mr. Speaker, I stood here in March saying I knew people were worried, and I know they're worried still. We have taken decisive action to protect our economy, but people are anxious about losing their job, about unemployment rising. We're not just going to accept this. People need to know we will do all we can to give everyone the opportunity of good and secure work. People need to know that although hardship lies ahead, no one will be left without hope. So today we act with a plan for jobs. Our plan has a clear goal: to protect, support, and create jobs. It will give businesses the confidence to retain and hire, to create jobs in every part of our country, to give young people a better start, to give people everywhere the opportunity of a fresh start. Where problems emerge, we will confront them. Where support is justified, we will provide it. Where challenges arise, we will overcome them. We entered this crisis unencumbered by dogma, and we continue in this spirit, driven always by the simple desire to do what is right. Mr. Speaker, before I turn to our plan for jobs, let me first outline the nature of the challenge. Our economic response to coronavirus is moving through three phases. In the first phase, beginning in March, the government announced social distancing measures and ordered businesses to close, halting the spread of the disease. We put in place one of the largest and most comprehensive economic responses in the world. Our £160 billion plan protects people's jobs, incomes, and businesses. We supported more than 11 million people and jobs through the job retention and self-employment schemes, alongside billions of pounds for the most vulnerable. We supported over 1 million businesses to protect jobs through tax cuts, tax deferrals, direct cash grants, and over 1 million government-backed loans. And we supported public services with new funding for the NHS, schools, public transport, and local authorities. In total, we have now provided £49 billion to support public services since this crisis began. Analysis I'm publishing today shows our interventions significantly protected people's incomes, with the least well-off in society supported the most. And this crisis has highlighted the special bond which holds our country together. Millions of people in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland have been protected by the UK government's economic interventions, and they will be supported by today's plan for jobs. No nationalist can ignore the undeniable truth. This help has only been possible because we are a united kingdom. Mr. Speaker, 4 months on, as we carefully reopen our economy, we are entering the second phase of our economic response. Despite the extraordinary support we've already provided, we face profound economic challenges. World economic activity has slowed, with the IMF expecting the deepest global recession since records began. Household consumption, the biggest component of our economy, has fallen steeply. Businesses have stopped trading and stopped hiring. Taken together, in just 2 months, our economy contracted by 25%, the same amount it grew in the previous 18 years. And the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility and Bank of England are both projecting significant job losses, the most urgent challenge we now face. I want every person in this House and in the country to know that I will never accept unemployment as an unavoidable outcome. We haven't done everything we have so far, just to step back now and say job done. In truth, the job has only just begun. Mr. Speaker, if the first phase of our economic response was about protection, and the second phase, the phase we're addressing today, is about jobs, there will come a third phase where we will rebuild. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has set out our vision to level up, unite the country, spread opportunity, and repair and heal the wounds exposed through this crisis. I can tell the House we will produce a budget and spending review in the autumn. And we will deal too with the challenges facing our public finances. Over the medium term, we must and we will put our public finances back on a sustainable footing. In other words, our plan for jobs will not be the last action. It is merely the next in our fight to recover and rebuild after coronavirus. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the detail of our plan for jobs. Central to our economic response has been the Jobs Retention Scheme. Furlough has been a lifeline for millions, supporting people and businesses to protect jobs. But it cannot and should not go on forever. I know that when furlough ends, it will be a difficult moment. I'm also sure that if I say the scheme must end in October, critics will say it should end in November. If I say it should end in November, critics will just say December. But the truth is, calling for endless extensions to the furlough is just as irresponsible as it would have been back in June to end the scheme overnight. We have to be honest. Leaving the furlough scheme open forever gives people false hope that it will always be possible to return to the jobs they had before. And the longer people are on furlough, the more likely it is their skills could fade and they will find it harder to get new opportunities. It is in no one's long-term interest for the scheme to continue forever, least of all those trapped in a job that can only exist because of a government subsidy. So the furlough will wind down flexibly and gradually, supporting businesses and people through to October. But while we can't protect every job, one of the most important things we can do to prevent unemployment is to get as many people as possible from furlough back to their jobs. So today, we're introducing a new policy to reward and incentivise employers who successfully bring furloughed staff back. A new Jobs Retention Bonus. If you're an employer and you bring someone back who was furloughed and you continuously employ them through to January, we will pay you a £1,000 bonus per employee. It is vital that people aren't returning just for the sake of it. They need to be doing decent work. So for businesses to get this bonus, the employee must be paid at least £520 on average in each month from November to January, the equivalent of the lower earnings limit in national insurance. The House should understand the significance of this policy. We will pay the bonus for all furloughed employees. So if employers bring back all 9 million people who have been furloughed, this would be a £9 billion policy to retain people in work. Our message to business is clear. If you stand by your workers, we will stand by you. Mr. Speaker, the furlough was the right policy to support people through the first phase of this crisis. But now, in this new phase, we need to evolve our approach. Today, I want to set out for the House a new three-point plan for jobs. We need to first support people to find jobs. Second, create jobs. And third, protect jobs. Mr. Speaker, let me start with supporting jobs, and in particular, the help we want to provide for those who will be hardest hit by this crisis, younger people. Over 700,000 people are leaving education this year. Many more are just starting out in their careers. Coronavirus has hit them hard. Under 25s are 2.5 times as likely to work in a sector that has been closed. We cannot lose this generation, So today I'm announcing the Kickstart Scheme, a new programme to give hundreds of thousands of young people in every region and nation of Britain the best possible chance of getting on and getting a job. The Kickstart Scheme will directly pay employers to create new jobs for any 16 to 24-year-old at risk of long-term unemployment. These will be new jobs, with the funding conditional on the firm proving these jobs are additional. These will be decent jobs, with a minimum of 25 hours per week paid at least the national minimum wage, and they will be good quality jobs, with employers providing Kickstarters with training and support to find a permanent job. If employers meet these conditions, we will pay young people's wages for 6 months plus an amount to cover overheads. That means for a 24-year-old, the grant will be around £6,500. Employers can apply to be part of the scheme from next month, with the first Kickstarters in their new jobs this autumn. And I urge every employer, big or small, national or local, to hire as many Kickstarters as possible. Today I'm making available an initial £2 billion, enough to fund hundreds of thousands of jobs. And I commit today there will be no cap on the number of places available. We can do more for young people. Traineeships are a proven scheme to get young people ready for work. We know they work, so for the first time ever, we will pay employers £1,000 to take on new trainees, with triple the number of places. To support 18 to 19-year-olds leaving school or college to find work in high-demand sectors like engineering, construction and social care, we'll provide £100 million to create more places on Level 2 and 3 courses. And the evidence says careers advice works, so we will fund it, with enough new careers advisors to support over 250,000 more people. We will also expand our universal skills offer. Sector-based work academies provide training, work placements and a guaranteed job interview in high-demand sectors. The evidence shows they work, so we will expand them, tripling the number of places. And we know apprenticeships work too. 91% of apprentices stay in work or do further training afterwards. So, for the next 6 months, we're going to pay employers to create new apprenticeships. We will pay businesses to hire young apprentices with a new payment of £2,000 per apprentice. And we will introduce a brand new bonus for businesses to hire apprentices aged 25 and over with a payment of £1,500. And let me thank my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, for his support and commitment in developing these measures. Mr. Speaker, we know the longer someone is out of work, the harder it is to return. Millions of people are moving onto universal credit. They need urgent support to get back to work. So, we are doubling the number of work coaches in job centres, increasing the Flexible Support Fund, extending the Rapid Response Service, expanding the Work and Health Programme, and developing a new scheme to support the long-term unemployed. The academic and economic evidence tells us these are among the most effective things we can do. So I'm investing an extra £1 billion in DWP to support millions of people back to work. And I'm grateful for everything my right honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary, and her incredible team have done. £1 billion of support for the unemployed, more money for skills, traineeships and apprenticeships, and a new, good quality job for hundreds of thousands of new Kickstarters. The first part of our plan for jobs. Mr. Speaker, the second part of our plan is to support job creation. That begins with historic investment in infrastructure, creating jobs in every region and nation of the UK. At budget, I announced £88 billion of capital funding this year, and last week the Prime Minister announced our plans to accelerate £5 billion of additional investment projects. We are doubling down on our ambition to level up with better roads, better schools, better hospitals, better high streets, creating jobs in all four corners of our country. Mr. Speaker, as well as investing in infrastructure, we want to create green jobs. This is going to be a green recovery with concern for our environment at its heart. As part of that, I'm announcing today a new £2 billion Green Homes Grant. From September, homeowners and landlords will be able to apply for vouchers to make their homes more energy efficient and create local jobs. The grants will cover at least 2/3 of the cost, up to £5,000 per household. And for low-income households, we'll go even further, with vouchers covering the full cost, up to £10,000. On top of the £2 billion voucher scheme, I'm releasing £1 billion of funding to improve the energy efficiency of public sector buildings, alongside a £50 million fund to pilot the right approach to decarbonise social housing. Taken together, we expect these measures to make over 650,000 homes more energy efficient, save households up to £300 a year on their bills, cut carbon by more than 0.5 megatonne per year, equivalent to taking 270,000 cars off the road, and most importantly right now, support around 140,000 green jobs. A £3 billion green jobs plan to save money, cut carbon and create jobs. Mr. Speaker, one of the most important sectors for job creation is housing. The construction sector adds £39 billion a year to the UK economy. House building alone supports nearly 750,000 jobs, with millions more relying on the availability of housing to find work. But property transactions fell by 50% in May. House prices have fallen for the first time in 8 years, and uncertainty abounds in the market, a market we need to be thriving. We need people feeling confident to buy, sell, renovate, move and improve. That will drive growth. That will create jobs. So, to catalyse the housing market and boost confidence, I have decided today to cut stamp duty. Right now, there is no stamp duty on transactions below £125,000. Today, I am increasing the threshold to £500,000. This will be a temporary cut running until the 31st of March next year. And, as is always the case, these changes to stamp duty will take effect immediately. The average stamp duty bill will fall by £4,500, and nearly 9 out of 10 people buying a main home this year will pay no stamp duty at all. Stamp duty cuts, a £5,000 Green Homes grant, and tens of billions of pounds of new capital projects. We are creating jobs, the second part of our plan for jobs. Mr. Speaker, the final part of our plan will protect jobs that already exist by helping some of our highest employing but hardest hit sectors, hospitality and tourism. Our economy relies on consumption, especially social consumption. The pubs, cafes, restaurants, hotels and B&Bs that bring life to our villages, towns and cities. Taken together, these sectors employ over 2 million people, disproportionately younger, women and people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And many rural and coastal communities rely on these industries. 80% of hospitality firms temporarily stopped trading in April, and 1.4 million workers have been furloughed, the highest proportions of any sector. So the best jobs programme we can do is to restart these sectors and get our pubs, restaurants, cafes and B&Bs bustling again. I know people are cautious about going out. but we wouldn't have lifted the restrictions if we didn't think we could do so safely. And I've seen in the last few weeks how hard businesses are working to make their premises safe. And if we follow the guidance and respect what they ask us to do, we can all enjoy summer safely. In turn, we need to give these businesses the confidence to know that if they open up, invest in making their premises safe, and protect jobs, demand will be there, and be there quickly. So today I'm announcing 2 new measures to get these sectors moving and protect jobs. First, at the moment, VAT on hospitality and tourism is charged at 20%. So I've decided for the next 6 months to cut VAT on food, accommodation and attractions. Eat-in or hot takeaway food from restaurants, cafes and pubs, accommodation in hotels, B&Bs, campsites and caravan sites, attractions like cinemas, theme parks and zoos. All these and more will see VAT reduced from next Wednesday until January the 12th from 20% to 5%. This is a £4 billion catalyst for the hospitality and tourism sectors, benefiting over 150,000 businesses and consumers everywhere, all helping to protect 2.4 million jobs. But, Mr. Speaker, we will go further. The final measure I'm announcing today has never been tried in the UK before. This moment is unique. We need to be creative. So, to get customers back into restaurants, cafes and pubs and protect the 1.8 million people who work in them, I can announce today that for the month of August, we will give everyone in the country an Eat Out to Help Out discount. Meals eaten at any participating business, Monday to Wednesday, will be 50% off up to a maximum discount of £10 per head for everyone, including children. Businesses will need to register and can do so through a simple website open next Monday. Each week in August, businesses can then claim the money back with the funds in their bank account within 5 working days. 1.8 million people work in this industry. They need our support. And with this measure, we can all eat out to help out. A VAT cut to 5% and a first-of-its-kind government-backed discount for all. That's the third part of our plan for jobs. So, Mr. Speaker, £1,000 jobs retention bonus. New, high-quality jobs for hundreds of thousands of young Kickstarters. £1 billion to double the number of work coaches and support the unemployed. More apprenticeships, more traineeships, more skills funding. Billions of pounds for new job creation projects across the country. A £3 billion plan to support 140,000 green jobs. And in this vital period, as we get going again, VAT cut, stamp duty cut, meals out cut. Mr. Speaker, all part of our plan for jobs worth up to £30 billion. Mr. Speaker, governments, much less people, rarely get to choose the moments that define them. What choice there is comes in how we respond. For me, this has never just been a question of economics, but of values. I believe in the nobility of work. I believe in the inspiring power of opportunity. I believe in the British people's fortitude and endurance. And it is that value, endurance, more than any other, we need to embody now. A patience to live with the uncertainty of the moment, to find that new balance between safety and normality. We will not be defined by this crisis, but by our response to it. It is an unambiguous choice to make this moment meaningful for our country in a way that transcends the frustration and loss of recent months. It is a plan to turn our national recovery into millions of stories of personal renewal. Mr. Speaker, it is our plan for jobs, and I commend it to this House.
Order, order. Before I call the Shadow Chancellor, I inform honourable and right honourable members that at the end of questions on this statement, I will call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move a provisional collection of taxes resolution. Copies of the resolution are available in the vote office. I now call the Shadow Chancellor, Alicia Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, our country has been through a great deal over these past few months. Hundreds of thousands have wrestled with this terrible disease. For many months, people have had to go without being able to embrace their loved ones, even to say goodbye. Tens of thousands have died. Our NHS, social care and other workers have made extraordinary sacrifices. We owe them so much. The government has had to take big decisions too. We acknowledge that. But today, Mr. Speaker, should have been the day when our government chose to build a bridge between what has been done so far and what needs to be done to get our economy moving again. It should have been the day when the millions of British people worried about their jobs and their future prospects had a load taken off their shoulders. It should have been the day when we got the UK economy firing again. Today, Britain should have had a back-to-work budget, but instead, we got this summer statement with many of the big decisions put off until later, as the benches opposite know full well. Now, Labour is a constructive opposition during this time of crisis. We won't criticise for criticism's sake, but when the government falls short, we will speak up. And the blunt truth is, we have one of the highest death rates in the world and among the deepest economic damage in the industrialised world from coronavirus. So the very first thing the Chancellor must do is prevent additional economic damage due to the slow public health response of his government. As we've seen throughout this crisis, the failure to match soaring rhetoric with meaningful action has consequences for people across our country. Despite all its talk, the government has failed to create a fully functioning test, track and isolate system. This has damaged public confidence and, in turn, harmed consumer demand. Despite all its talk, the government has failed to produce a clear system for local lockdowns. The lack of timely information sharing has led, as we all know, to the imposition of an additional wide-scale lockdown in Leicester. The government's contracts with outsourcing firms amount to almost £3 billion, but we still haven't got test, track and isolate working properly in the UK, like it is in many other countries, and government still hasn't got a grip on the low value and limited scope of sick pay, risking people's ability to self-isolate. Fear is corrosive. Fear is hurting our economy. Government has got to get this right. Now, of course, we welcome the government's announcement today of targeted VAT cuts on hospitality and tourism and of vouchers to be used in restaurants. Local businesses desperately need that support, and so many low and middle income people in particular really need help right now. That's why we've repeatedly called for social security to better meet their needs and prevent people risking losing their homes. If delivered properly, these measures should help. But the Chancellor himself said, when interviewed on the Andrew Marr show, that the best the government can do to boost demand is to give consumers and workers the confidence and psychological security that they can go out to work, to shop and to socialise in safety. So please, Chancellor, work with your colleagues so our public health response catches up with that operating in other countries. And Mr. Speaker, The Prime Minister said, "What have I been doing about that?" My party has been repeatedly suggesting solutions to the public health problems facing our country, and we need to adopt them in the UK before this crisis becomes even more severe. Now, government must act not just to deal with unemployment as a symptom, but also with its cause. Research reported this week in The Telegraph indicates that British workers have already been the biggest casualty in the global jobs cut. It showed that while jobs markets in many other countries have already fully recovered, in Britain it could take comparatively much longer for vacancy levels to return to normal. The levels of unemployment this country saw in the past were not just an economic waste. They ruined lives. We're seeing the same impacts again, the same devastated high streets and communities robbed of their pride and purpose. Now, when it comes to the Reemployment Bonus announced by the Chancellor, of course this is necessary, not least because his government refused to put conditions on the use of those funds related to employment. But I would ask him, first of all, how can he ensure that that money will not just go to those employers who were already planning to bring people back into work? And secondly, what will he do? What will he do for those firms that lack the cash flow to be able to operate, even with that bonus? And related to this, the Chancellor still needs to abandon his one-size-fits-all approach to withdrawing the job retention and self-employed schemes. No one is saying those schemes should stay as they are indefinitely. We have never said that on this side of the House. But we have said that the money spent on the job retention scheme must not serve merely to postpone unemployment. The scheme must live up to its name, supporting employment in industries that are viable in the long term. And we need a strategy for the scheme to become more flexible so it can support those businesses forced to close again because of additional localised lockdowns. There's still time to avoid additional floods of redundancy notices. It's the government's duty to help Britain through this and stop employment at mass levels again. We need action to ensure the support needed for key sectors of our economy, for our SMEs and our manufacturers. And while, of course, we welcome the long-overdue arts and culture package, we still haven't heard the government's plans for other sectors. Many of us expected to hear them today, but we haven't. The Operation Birch process has been slow, tortuous and opaque. Large parts of industrial Britain need help to get through this, to keep their employees in jobs and keep their suppliers in jobs. Meanwhile, it appears there will be no solutions for SMEs who can't take on additional debt until the autumn. This risks many SMEs going to the wall. Until now, the Chancellor has described a targeted sectoral approach as the Treasury picking winners. But the necessary public health measures have created losers. As the Chancellor himself said just now, the government required many businesses to shut down to prevent the spread of this disease. Supporting businesses that are viable in the long run but currently starved of cash flow is not a matter of picking winners. It's about protecting our country's economic capacity for the future. Failure to do so, to make the job retention and self-employed schemes more targeted and focused and to support viable businesses, is driving up unemployment in this country. The claimant count is on course to top 3 million people in June, the highest number since the previous record in 1986. This is the Chancellor's record, and one which cannot and must not be worsened. Now, where unemployment arises as a symptom of economic damage, more must be done to help. Now, Labour repeatedly called for government to match the ambitions of Labour's Future Jobs Fund and Welsh Labour's Jobs Growth Wales programme. And finally, government has come forward with a scheme apparently modelled on them, the Kickstart Scheme. The Conservatives, of course, cancelled the Future Jobs Fund. It's taken them almost 10 years to catch up, and as with their belated adoption of our call for jobs, 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 perhaps this gives a new meaning to the phrase Project Speed. But we need to make sure now that that Kickstart scheme provides genuinely additional opportunities for young unemployed people. And government must also recognise the specific challenges faced by older job seekers, many of whom are becoming unemployed for the first time, and those based in especially hard-hit places. Reimposing sanctions now is punitive and counterproductive when job seekers need support. Now, we must be ambitious for the future of our country's economy. Our ambition should not just be to build our way out of this, but to do so in a greener and cleaner way. For this, we need more than the reheated announcements by the Prime Minister last week. Of course, the investment announced was welcome, not least because much of it was already committed to by the government. And core elements are missing. 50 million to support retrofitting in social homes, for example, is just a seventh of what the Conservatives said they would be spending every year. And the muddled confusions over stamp duty over the last 48 hours reflect a broader lack of strategy when it comes to house building, particularly for genuinely affordable and social homes. Overall, the UK's green investment package barely touches the sides of other countries' commitments. Even with what was announced today, it only equates to only just over the value of Germany's investment in one green technology alone, hydrogen. The Committee on Climate Change indicated how far behind the UK is in the race to decarbonise. Failure to heed its recommendations isn't only damaging to our planet, it also cuts us out of leading the development of the key technologies of the future. And the Conservatives, of course, are still refusing to impose conditions on investment to ensure that it contributes to the goal of net zero, that it supports local jobs, uses local firms, leads to sustainable, skilled employment in local areas and prevents the use of tax havens and other forms of asset stripping. Finally, if the Chancellor really wants to build back better, he must prevent a rerun of the past. From 2010 onwards, we've seen how families' resilience has been eroded. We entered this crisis with a quarter of families lacking even £100 in savings. In a typical classroom of 39 children are growing up in poverty, and our economy is the most regionally unequal in Europe. Our local authorities continue to be cut to the bone, with many standing on the brink of bankruptcy as we speak. And rather than the promise that our NHS and social care services would get whatever they needed this winter to weather a potential second wave, those words were conspicuously absent from the Chancellor's speech just now. Now, politicians in this House have gone out on our doorsteps to clap key workers while the lowest paid have struggled to keep a roof over their heads. We must have a new settlement for the future, an end to poverty pay for our social care workers and those who clean our hospitals and deliver our groceries, a recognition of the value of the work of those who have been taken for granted for far too long. Now, there were some initial press reports that the government was due to announce generalised tax increases or cuts to services this autumn, contradicted by the Prime Minister, who rejected whatever had apparently been briefed out by the Treasury. It's happened quite a few times. Well, I say to the government, if it does increase taxes during the recovery and cuts back on the public services we all rely on, this will damage demand and inhibit our recovery. Labour is not calling for tax rises. We are calling for growth. Now, the Tory manifesto committed to no rises in income tax, national insurance or VAT, and therefore it is for the Conservatives to set out how any additional spending will be paid for. It's the Chancellor's job to make sure the economy bounces back from this crisis so there's money in the coffers to protect the public finances. Now, last week, Mr Speaker, the Chancellor's colleague, the Prime Minister, tried to claim the mantle of FDR, as we all know. Maybe now we know why he went for Roosevelt, because this week the Prime Minister blamed carers for the failings in the system that his government had underfunded for the past decades. Now we know why he went for Roosevelt, because the last thing his government would have wanted was the sign on Harry Truman's desk, the successor to Roosevelt. That sign said, "The buck stops here." If this government had a sign, it would probably say, "The buck stops anywhere but here." But it can't escape its responsibilities. To govern is to choose to finally sort out test track and isolate, to prevent unnecessary additional unemployment and to build the green jobs of the future. This is a moment when our country needs its government to help Britain through.